What if I tell you that your finance team could automate their month-end close process just by describing it in plain English? No need to call your developers or no need to code anything. That's actually where we are heading, whether you like it or not. And it is changing the way we write applications. And today we have with us Binny Gill, CEO of Kognitos, to explain why natural language is becoming the future of enterprise automation. But before we deep dive into all of this thing, first of all, Binny, it's great to have you on the show. You are CEO of this company. A company I think is 4 or 5 years old, as you mentioned. I would love to know a bit about the company first. What do you folks do? And in this era, when most of the problems seem solved, what led you to create Cognitos? What does the company do?
Thank you, Swapnil, for having me on your show. And I'm very happy to be here, especially at this time and age where AI is changing everything, the way the nature of work is changing. 5 years ago, when I was looking at this problem, I mean, this was pre-ChatGPT and others. And I wanted to figure out, is this the right time when we can democratize the art of telling a computer what to do from just developers to everybody in the business? For the last 5 decades, what was happening was the business side would get an idea. Somebody sitting in finance and accounting would say, you know what, next quarter, I would like to do it this way. This is how I pay invoices. This is how I onboard new vendor. But then they have to give it to IT, I give it to a developer, and that person translates it into the machine language, whatever the machine understands. And I was thinking, let's give it a shot. My inspiration actually came from Alexa and my kids talking to Alexa in English. Now they are telling a computer what they want and it does it for them. And I was like, why does, in business have to be any different? So I started off thinking it'll take about 10 years to get to that state. But, just 5 years later, we are at a point where you can describe your standard process in English as a document, and our system just implements it just like a human would have followed the standard process. AI is now able to follow the process. It's great to be here at this time.
What actually made that possible now, which was not possible 5 years ago? That is first part of the question. The second part is, how much involvement should or does it take from the actual person, a business guy, not a developer, to get his idea, put it in words, and see an app or automated process in place? So there are two-part question. You can handle it the way you want.
Yeah. So first, let me talk about where the world is going and why where the world is going is perfectly natural. So just let's keep computers aside for a moment, right? Just let's talk about a group of human beings running an enterprise like a company, even 100 years ago, whatever you'd have. So if there are 3 or 4 people in a company, it's okay. These people really well, and you come together and set some goals and off you go. The moment it goes to 50 people, 100 people, then the leaders in the company say, hey, you know what, let's create process, people, and then after that process comes. Why do we say we want process? Process is how we control outcomes in the presence of intelligence of various kinds. So different humans are in your company. Everybody is intelligent in a different way. They come from different backgrounds and different biases, all of those cultural values, all that they bring in. But by writing down process, you're saying, I can predict how the business is going to work because all these employees are going to follow the process. And if I want to change the outcome of my business, I don't go and train all my 50 people. I just change the process and send out another memo. This is how business has worked for millennia. In fact, this is how also countries work. You write down the constitution, that's my process of doing things. And then the whole country looks at it. This is how religion works. You write down the rules of the religion, whether it's commandments or whatever, and everybody follows that. So human beings have naturally figured out how to control intelligence at scale. Now let's talk about AI. AI is also intelligence, and it's not one intelligence. Every 2 months, it's changing. It's churning on us. ChatGPT 3.5 left us, 4.0 left us, and then a new one comes in. It's like an employee leaving and coming back, a new one coming in. A new one is better. How will businesses work in that paradigm? You have to write down process. Now this time for AI. Okay. fundamentally, this is the thought process I was thinking of 5 years ago. Like, businesses run by written down process. What language? It's English. It's not Python. It's not what a developer writes. It's what a business guy writes. We called it business logic when I was at IIT Kanpur learning computer science. We were taught take business logic and translate it into code. And here I was thinking maybe we don't need to translate business logic. The computer itself is smart enough to understand business logic natively, just like human employees do. So this is, Swapnil, this is the direction where we believe the world is going now, very, very fast. Okay. Now, what is possible, what is not possible as of today? I can talk about that, right? So today, most systems, like if you're using ChatGPT or Copilot and stuff, you give it a goal and it will try to figure out in an agentic fashion and try to get to the goal. But if you give it a process, for it to follow it deterministically, the same way every time, with the no bias, no hallucination guarantee that employees give, that is still not possible today. And at Kognitos, we are trying to solve that problem by changing how AI executes the written down process, right? So if you give humans a process, they will do it based on their own tribal knowledge, their own education and all of that. AI does not belong to any tribe. So you can't assume that AI will do what you think your employees would have done. It doesn't know which company it's working for and how the C-suite of that company really wants to act. So what we have built is a neurosymbolic AI engine that is able to look at written down SOPs in English, but very detailed English. And it guarantees that it's going to follow it step by step. It won't miss a step. And if it is ambiguous, it cannot guess. It doesn't have the ability of being generative at runtime. It will just stop there, bring in a human and a model that can be creative, and with the human figure out what's the next best action and continue. So the whole philosophy is that separate the creative aspect of AI, which is generative, which is creative, from the execution aspect of AI, which is neurosymbolic, deterministic, and put the human in the middle to review the process. And that today is possible, right? But of course, it's the early days of this kind of thought process. I'm at this conference, HumanX, right now. People are talking about how do I make AI deterministic? How do I get rid of hallucination? And this is the way we've done it for customers.
If you look at companies in general, what they do is they take a kind of natural language interface, they layer it on top of their traditional automation tool. But when I listen to you, I think your approach is a lot different from what they are doing. Can you talk about how you are approaching it and how much success you have had with all this hallucination, and also sometimes a lot of prompts, it seems that they're written for humans, not for AI. Prompt should be written for AI, not for human itself. So what is your approach? What is Kognitos' approach to change that, where, instead of just slapping AI or welding AI on top of everything else, the approach itself is different?
Absolutely. And the approach has to be different, right? See, if you are putting in a generative AI and that is creative, I mean, to make it work in the way that you expect it to work, it's not enough. You can't make it smarter and expect it now it's going to behave the same way as you were mentioning. Sometimes a smarter model will become more creative and in a bad way, and then it will also not do what you really wanted it to do. So we have changed the game. The question there is to understand, you don't even have to be a prompt engineer. I feel that is just a temporary thing. You just chat with an AI system, just like in Cursor or Claude, you chat with an AI system and it writes code, right? It writes a Python code, Java code. Here we are saying you chat with our system and it is going to write your SOP. English is now the new coding language. But the way it writes the English SOP, it's a very detailed English specification, but it's fluent English. Anybody can read and understand. But normally, if you ask a human to write the SOP, they'll be lazy. They won't write it all detailed. So we're asking AI to be the curator of the standard process of the business by having an interview with the human. Now, the English as code, when it is written, We have built an interpreter for that English that we have written it in Rust language. It's secure and very fast. It runs that English code without LLMs. Therefore, it is deterministic. Therefore, it cannot hallucinate. We have built it's an interpreter that has two critical innovative pieces that we have patented. First, it understands English and it's a time machine, meaning if you hit a problem in step number 5, you're going to update the SAP system with an order entry. And it turns out that that order is already there in the SAP system. This system won't crash, unlike, Python and all that. It pauses there and then quickly bubbles up to a generative, like a frontier model layer. And that is looking at this interpreter and its time machine data and figuring out, hey, what went wrong, reasons about it, pulls in a human. Hey man, this entry is already there. What should I do? Should I replace that entry? Should I add a duplicate? Or should I just drop this on the floor? Now it's up to the human to tell. You could not have just given it to a smart LLM because it would have done some guess. And the right answer is not what the AI can figure out. The right answer is what the human knows in the business. So then human says, oh, in this case, do that. Now this goes back. Our creative AI writes a new program, a patch for that English's code. And you don't have to go right to the beginning and start again. It just continues from there. We have the patent for that. And then it solves the problem. Then we have the curator coming back and saying, oh, I hit this problem once. It writes a knowledge base article. Say, when this happens, John told me that I have to replace the order with this is the updated order. Sends it back to the person, the VP of finance or whatever. Do you think this should be considered as best practice now in your business? Or was it a one-off thing? So now you see what's happening. So Swapnil, we are collecting tribal knowledge from people's heads. It's like transparent. They don't know that it's doing. And what our AI does is document. The standard process is documented. The tribal knowledge is documented. And this is the layer of indirection between intelligence and what the business wants.
No, so it and only difference between the AI's tribal knowledge is that tribal knowledge can become the organization wide available knowledge, whereas with people that tribal knowledge goes away when people leave. With AI, that is not the case. That becomes your knowledge of your organization. Is this also how you would explain neurosymbolic when we're talking about combining traditional logic with AI, or there's more layers to that?
So neurosymbolic means that when I'm executing it, I will be executing with a symbolic engine, but when I'm coming up with the plan, it's a neural engine. So normally when you're talking with an LLM, it's both doing planning and execution at the same time. It'll plan the next step, then it'll call, then again plan, then call, right? So it's a mixed planning and execution. We believe that planning you separate out from execution. So planning, it can be highly creative and therefore risky. And sometimes it'll come up with a plan that you don't want to approve. But you need to have the ability of saying, I told you a complex problem. Show me the step by step. What are you going to do in English? Once I review it, Swapnil, that must be symbolically executed. It must be executed as if it was code. So that breakup of neural behavior and symbolic behavior in one platform is what we define as neurosymbolic architecture. We do not use LLMs for figuring out the next step. If that is the case, it must be human copilot. You cannot take out the human and say, you don't have to look at this, because it's always, So, and ROI only comes in a business if you can actually take human out of the loop and say, you'll only be needed once the machine needs some help. I'm learning from industrial age. Assembly lines were created, and what did humans do? They would only be needed if the machine needed help, right? Otherwise, the machine is keeping on going. AI, the same thing we believe will happen, but therefore the machine has to be deterministic. It needs to not be creative. It's like, I'll do one step and I'll continue and continue. We want to create an assembly line of AI machines. And that is how your finance and accounting should run. That is how your HR should run, legal should run. With human kind of new blue collar workers are like those people who can manage these AI pipelines, right? oil the machine if it goes wrong, or maybe buy a new machine that is better and faster, stuff like that.
When we talk about neurosymbolic, when we talk about deterministic approach, how do you solve, or how have you solved the hallucination problem where the drift happens, and that drift, for content creation is okay, but for business.
It's not okay. It's absolutely not. And our system is deployed in finance and accounting, mission critical, right? I mean, where one extra zero will just bring down the whole company, right? And so, yes, you cannot afford to put something that is not neurosymbolic in this assembly line of machines. So when we talk about these assembly line of AI machines, the AI machine is running deterministic code. It runs the same way. You give it the same input, it will give you the same output 100 times. It'll do it that way, right? That is what we mean by neurosymbolic. Because the plan, what is the machine? Machine is a plan. It's not a prompt. Prompt does not give you the same answer 100 times. But in our system, when you're looking at an SOP in English, you run it 100 times, it gives you the same result 100 times. What we have done is separated the planning and the execution, right? Execution does not use LLMs. It uses a deterministic symbolic AI engine that runs it. The planning is highly creative. So now what happens is the AI machine, if nothing bad happens, it doesn't need help. There's no edge case. It's not a new variant that it has not seen before. 100% deterministic, no problem. Anytime there's a variant, it just cannot do it because it's not generative AI. It's symbolic AI. So it pauses and calls a generative AI into the picture. We call it the resolution agent. It's almost like the factory worker is called. Now he's looking at the machine, then realizes I have to do oiling and all of that. So they realize, oh, this is a new kind of invoice. Let me tell it where to find the PO from. It's actually in this particular ERP system that we have, or sometimes it's an Excel sheet. So the human gives that feedback to the system, and the system then converts that into symbolic logic again, and then executes that. So we are basically saying your entire pipeline must be running deterministically, but solve the core problem that was there in automation, which is handling variations and edge cases in a way that is scalable without developers. The way you handle the edge cases is through normal English chat. And this is done by the SME, like the person who used to handle these purchase orders manually. They do it because they know the business process. The tribal knowledge from their head is now getting into the AI system, right? But the human is always there. I think that architecture is what will work for these mission critical stuff.
Is it possible for you where you can maybe walk us through a specific example? Because you said, finance are using it, legals are using it, HR is using it, where you can just share an example of business process that Kognitos has automated. Ideally, where, also you are at this conference, also where, you would have required a developer to get that done. But that company, I mean, you can name or not name, but through Kognitos, they were able to do a very complex RPA implementation without any developer, without any coding.
So I'll give you one example of a company we will not name, but they're a Fortune 500 company. All their international payments, before Kognitos was put in, they had tried to do it with one of the RPA vendors. Okay. So what happens is people wire the money to the company and it goes to one of three banks. And there, every day the bank report comes in, like this wire transfer was obtained from this particular name. And in that memo is like what invoice is being paid. Now, this has to be matched with the DSO report from SAP every day. And people have to figure out what has been paid, what has not been paid. If it has been paid, then you go send an acknowledgement that we have received a payment. Now, at the high level, it seems very simple. You apply a RPA to it and it keeps on breaking every day. And I'll tell you why. Because people wire the money, send an email. Sometimes they put a screenshot of what, internet, the proof of like I sent it. Sometimes they send a PDF, sometimes they send an email, sometimes there's a typo, sometimes they do partial payment. Sometimes they club two invoices and pay in one. All sorts of variations are there. RPA would constantly break. An RPA developer was needed. So a team of 8 people doing this turns into a team of 4 developers who are paid a lot more than simply, people who would do, the matching of this. It didn't go anywhere. Kognitos comes in. We say, okay, let us this, and this is coming to an mailbox where every day there's like 1,000 emails coming in. Okay. And sometimes there are also some random emails that also come to that same thing to spoil, this thing. Firstly, Kognitos has a process where you defined what to do, take the, if it's a PDF or a picture, something, extract the invoice number, extract the amount, figure out what the customer name could be, do a fuzzy match into the daily report from the SAP system. And then if it's a perfect match to it. Now, first time we did it, 80-20 rule. 80% would go through. Remaining 20%, it would raise a hand, go to the same person who used to do it manually and say, hey, I couldn't do it. Manual person says, okay, there's only less than $1 difference. In this case, we normally accept it. Now, AI cannot guess that, business is okay if it's $1 difference. And now it learns, says, okay, should I learn this thing? And say, yes. So now it has learned that tribal knowledge on the side. Next time it doesn't bother. Then it comes like there's a currency translation. So, okay, the currency translation was not today's currency, but yesterday's currency. That's also acceptable. So over time, our system has learned this thing that 80% has now become 97%. The remaining 3% still comes because somebody is underpaying on purpose because they don't have money or something like that. Has to be done by humans, right? But it's like a lot of efficiency already done. And that's the flexibility as an example.
These examples are the one that actually help us understand how folks are actually doing it. Now, okay, that's good. It can do the code. It can deliver that business logic. But how do we know it is doing what it was supposed to do? What about governance? What about audits? Because if business users are building these automations, there should be some way to audit that also. There are a lot, you mentioned finance, there are a lot of regulated industry. They have to ensure compliance. They have to ensure security. So talk about governance and audit aspect as well.
Yeah, and that's the core strength that we have, as I mentioned, right? This neurosymbolic engine we built it as a time machine. Now, we built it as a time machine in order for AI to be able to understand when things are going wrong, why are they going wrong, right? But as a side effect, what we get is detailed audit. You can go and ask any question for one particular transaction. What was the value in step 2? Why did this get, if then else, what happened? Because it's mapped to business logic deterministically and everything is recorded, it is able to give you a better audit than even earlier RPA used to do, or Python. Of course, actually it doesn't. Programming languages don't give you audit. They just give you the final crashing state, like what happened. They do not normally record everything. We are recording everything. It's the most detailed audit that you can get. Fundamentally, our philosophy has been that you should, in a business setting, not tell anybody, hey, something crashed, I don't know what, let us reproduce the problem and then I will tell you. No, that cannot be done. Secondly, you cannot tell people, let's go start the onboarding of this vendor from the beginning. I mean, I've already created IDs for this vendor. Why should I start from the beginning? You're asking me to clean it up. Those are the challenges, which of course we don't have. So that's audit. Governance of AI. Anytime there is AI used in our systems, fully recorded, and you know what part is calling out to an LLM, what part is not. And anytime we are using AI, we also have a confidence associated with the answer. So it depends on the appetite of the user, whether they want to do, only high confidence work, or they could also be a little bit flexible because downstream there is a validation. So in the example that I gave you, people paying invoices and all of that, if they take a cell phone picture of their screen, laptop screen, now you're extracting the invoice number from there and the amount. Now there could be Moir pattern in the laptop screen and there could be low confidence when our system is looking at it. We flag it. In this particular case, it does not matter because downstream it will do a proper match with the DSO report from SAP. And if it matches, you know that the OCR was correct. If it doesn't match, then human is called in. Now, human will look at it and say, "Oh, actually, this is this," or human would say, "I don't know. We need to ask them to send a screenshot again," something like that, right? So that is the whole philosophy around that.
I won't even ask you how things will look like in 5 years because we don't know what will happen tomorrow. Quantum computing may come in 2 years and that will change the game altogether. But if your vision does play out the way you want, what does the enterprise look like in few years? Who builds automation? Who owns it? What happens to people who use it? What how will the workforce look like? Where will the owners be? Will we still have CEOs like you and me, or AI will run the company and we'll have like? If your vision does become true, what will an enterprise look like?
See, I think we will stop talking about automation, or we'll take automation for granted, right? I think it's just like, if there is a king, right? King doesn't think about how much labor it takes. I want to make a pyramid. Okay, I will tell you what to do, and I'll give you resources, and you're gonna do it, right? Automation will be. We will stop talking about automation, but we will start talking about philosophy. So the difference between one enterprise and the other would be about philosophy, like how do we want to approach solving the problems for our customers? And just like every restaurant has a different cuisine and a different way of serving customers. Everybody, but cooking is not a differentiator, right? It's like everybody can cook, but how you present, what is the ambience, that is what enterprises will differentiate on. Now, to make AI help you with that, you'll have to document that thoroughly. Like, this is what I mean by that. I like this, I don't like this. And so that's the first phase, documentation of what you want. Then it's about AI is helping you document. So that curator of the documentation is what will ask you, hey, tell me your philosophy so I can document better for you. And CEOs would be having a conversation, philosophical conversation with AI and saying, this is what I care about. Like CEO of Patagonia would say, I care about environment. That's what I want to do, right? CEO of McDonald's would say something different, right? I want my fries to taste just the same in 1,000,000 stores, whatever, right? So that is fundamentally how I feel enterprise evolving. It's more about working with AI and specifying your philosophy and talking about your philosophy and differentiating about it. Brand is important. And then customers will come to you because they are aligned with how you think. So an automation, SaaS, software, these would get commoditized.
Yeah, Binny, thank you so much for joining me and sharing these insights and the way you're building the company and the kind of vision you have is, I think, I mean, this is one of the most polished vision that I've seen of AI, because a lot of companies, they talk about solving a specific problem, but you have a kind of vision of the way we do things in a broader scale, the way we write software and the way we are empowering everybody in the team, no matter where you're sitting. CEO can sit down and write an application, or even an HR manager can do that. So thanks for sharing all these insights, and I would love to chat with you because you folks are doing amazing thing in this space, but I really appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Thank you, Swapnil.